see somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Rishi Sunak is in Spain at the European political community. Didn't talk about that in Manchester, did he? We'll find out. Is he wasting his time trying to get a migration deal with other EU leaders? The governor of the Bank of England says Brexit has, wait for it, helped the City of London. Goodness me, you could knock me down with a feather. And at the end of a very, very heavy political week on programmes, we're going to finish off talking rugby. England are doing well in the Rugby World Cup finals in France. Our next game is on Saturday. We'll be joined by former international Jeff Probyn to ask about the game of rugby and what prospects England have. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you and good evening. Well, the news begins with the story of a man who broke into Windsor Castle armed with a loaded crossbow with the intent of killing the late Queen. He's been sentenced today to 9 years in jail for treason. Jaswant Singh Chahal wandered into the grounds for 2 hours on Christmas Day in 2021 while the late Queen was still in residence. The Old Bailey heard he'd been encouraged by an artificial intelligence virtual girlfriend with which he'd exchanged thousands of messages. The judge said Chahal was non-psychotic and therefore culpable when he devised his plot, but had lost touch with reality and became psychotic by the time he carried it out. Sir Keir Starmer has revealed today an extra 700,000 urgent dental appointments would be introduced under Labour plans to improve the nation's oral health. The party says it'll also introduce supervised toothbrushing in schools across England in order to tackle preventable tooth decay in children. People in most need of treatments, including fillings and root canal work, would be prioritised under proposals aimed at rescuing NHS dentistry, as they call it. The plans would be backed, Labour says, by £111 million a year, which they say will come from abolishing non-domicile tax status. Sir Keir says Labour wants to target areas where people can't get a dental appointment.
Too many places across the country there's a desert where you can't get an NHS dentist, so we also have a scheme in place to ensure that we get newly qualified dentists into those areas. So that's the immediate fix, but obviously in the longer term we need to do preventative measures. So the third limb of this is toothbrushing at schools where we've got the biggest problems in our breakfast clubs, to make sure that children are brushing in the right way and therefore we prevent some of the problems.
Well, as you've just been hearing, the Prime Minister is in Spain and he's been meeting with the Ukrainian President there, Volodymyr Zelensky, saying Europe must face down the threat from Russia. Rishi Sunak is there for the European Political Community Summit. The Prime Minister condemned today's attack in Ukraine and reiterated the UK's support for the country in their ongoing war. At least 51 people died after a Russian missile hit a cafe in northeastern Ukraine. It's reported the victims were holding a memorial service at the time. Ukrainian officials called it a heinous crime. It appears to be one of the biggest single civilian death tolls since the start of the war. And Rishi Sunak said that the only person responsible for the conflict is the Russian president, Vladimir Putin.
Just come from meeting President Zelensky where we discussed this horrific attack that has just happened. It just illustrates Russia's barbarity, and President Putin can say all he likes. There is one person responsible for this illegal, unprovoked war, and it is him, and he should stop. And that's why the UK has been steadfast in supporting Ukraine and will continue to do so. I'm proud that we were one of the first and we are one of the largest supporters of Ukraine. That will continue to be the case.
This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Well, if you listened to Rishi Sunak yesterday, you would think all of our problems in the English Channel have been solved. The numbers are down 20% this year, this time this year on last year. So should we all be happy that 25,000 mostly young men without identities have crossed the English Channel? I don't think so. And the traffickers have got a new technique. You see, we have now given or promised the French up to £800 million to stop the boats leaving those beaches. And it is true that the French police do go up to those dinghies when they're in the sand dunes or making their way down across the beach towards the sea. They do go up and put knives in them. And it happens to many of the boats. So the traffickers have now got a new method. This footage I'm going to show you right now was taken just outside Calais earlier this week. So see what's going on here. The dinghy, the massive dinghy that'll take between 70 and 80 people, is already at sea. It hasn't launched from that beach. It's come out of one of the rivers and come round. Effectively, it's what's now called a taxi boat. And you can see the people that are getting onto that boat have to wade out into the water, virtually up to their chests in water before they're taken into the boat. You can see there someone falling out of the boat, another person falling out of the boat. What this means is these very, very heavily laden. Now, there are 3 people coming back off that boat. I think they're the traffickers that loaded the people onto it. But those people now that are setting off, and all they've got to do is get 12 miles from Dover, and they'll get picked up by Border Force or the RNLI. Those people, before this journey even begins, are soaked to the skin and cold. Believe you me, whatever you're wearing, if you've been soaked in seawater up to your chest and you're going to sit in a stationary position for several hours, you are going to get cold very, very quickly indeed. And I will predict that at some point in the next couple of months, when there is a sinking, unless we have the luck, as we did with that scallop boat a few months ago, unless there is a helicopter or a lifeboat very close, if we get 70 or 80 people into the water who are already cold, I hate to think what the death toll is going to be. All of that, I promise you, is going to happen. Now, there was no mention in Manchester of something called the European Political Community. This was Macron's idea. For some reason, Rishi Sunak signed up to it. I, of course, want us to cooperate with our European friends, but I do not like the name Political Community. However, Rishi is in Granada in Spain this evening, and the idea is he's going to speak to other European leaders about data sharing and cooperation to deal with the common problem of illegal migration. For Europe, it's predominantly across the Mediterranean, although some does come in through the eastern borders. And for us, of course, it's through the English Channel. Here was Rishi Sunak speaking in Spain just a couple of hours ago.
Tackling illegal migration is a shared European challenge. Numbers are up everywhere, and I believe, as do other European leaders, that it should be us who decides who comes to our countries and not criminal gangs. That's why I was pleased that I could convene a meeting together with the Italian Prime Minister, but also leaders from Albania, the European Union, France and the Netherlands to talk through this issue, to see how more we can work together, strengthen our cooperation to combat this awful crime. And there is more that we can do, sharing intelligence, working upstream to disrupt supply chains, working with partner countries to ensure effective returns. These are all areas where we can work more closely together. That's what we talk through, and the UK today has signed new agreements with Serbia, Belgium and Bulgaria that will help strengthen our bilateral cooperation, and you're seeing the fruits of that at home. Numbers of arrivals into the UK this year down by a fifth. For the first time since the small boats phenomenon emerged, we managed to get the numbers down as a result of this type of work.
Well, Rishi Sunak, you're right. The numbers are down by a fifth, chiefly, in my opinion, because the weather this summer has been so dreadful. But if we get a long settled spell, I'm quite sure the numbers will go back to last year's level. But in going across to the European political community, in seeking help in dealing with our problem in the English Channel, let me ask you a very simple question. Is Rishi wasting his time? Give me your opinion, farage@gbnews.com, because I think he is. Well, joining me is a proper expert on these things, Professor Ian Begg, Professorial Research Fellow at the European Institute, London School of Economics and Political Science. And Ian, a man who has written about European cooperation and European deals over many, many years. Ian, I just want to say to you, the idea that we can come to some agreement with other European countries on this, it seems to me that they're actually at war with each other before we even start.
Well, you'd expect this for an academic, Nigel. Yes and no. The yes is that there are differences of perspective right across the EU. Countries which have hosted huge numbers of migrants already, like Germany and Sweden, are saying enough. Those on the front line, like Italy and Greece, are saying we can't cope with it on our own. And some within the EU, particularly countries like Hungary and Poland, are saying don't send them our way. However, in Poland's case, it's undeniable that they've taken a huge number of Ukrainian refugees, so they're already facing plenty of difficulty. The reason I say that there is a different perspective on this is that there is a common problem. We can't stop the demand to come to Europe. You may not like the European Union in your day, but a lot of people do, coming from other parts of the world, and they think it's a place to try to get to if you're poor or if you're somehow discriminated against in other countries. So there is a clear pull factor from the European Union, and unless there's some way of dealing with that, the pull factor, is going to continue indefinitely.
Yeah, I mean, Ian, I was there. I was there in Strasbourg in 2015 when Mr. Juncker, who was then the Commission President, unveiled, and it sort of dusted off, I suppose, really, and activated the European asylum policy, which basically said that anybody that set foot on EU soil, having crossed the Mediterranean, would be allowed to stay. Don't they have to fundamentally readdress that policy and start returning people to Libya, Tunisia, or wherever it may be?
Well, that's one solution. There's a question of whether returning somebody to Libya, which is, let's face it, one of the hellholes of the world now, is a morally appropriate thing to do if someone has made this huge effort to get out of it. Now, you may not like the people coming to Europe or eventually to the UK because you think we shouldn't be so generous towards them. But there is an imperative there to say, well, what's going on in the rest of the world, and can we do something about solving the problem at source?
Yeah, I understand that. No, so I do understand that. I mean, Gaddafi said to us before 2012, before we launched those attacks on Libya, he said, get rid of me and 5 million people will come to Europe. I'm beginning to wonder, did we cause this and actually cause the birth of ISIS ourselves?
Well, there's no doubt a long historical exercise to go into to work out who was most to blame in it. But yes, the chaos in Libya is in many ways a direct result of dumping Gaddafi. However, he'd gone so bonkers by the time he was kicked out that who knows what would happen shortly afterwards anyway, irrespective of whether Cameron and Sarkozy had agreed to intervene. So there is a problem here that sub-Saharan Africa in particular as a demographic profile, which means that young people are growing into this market They don't find jobs at home. They want to go elsewhere. That's a swell of humanity that wants to move to other places. The solution, one way round, would be to say, can we help economic development in these places to ensure that there is opportunity there for those who want to move, instead of thinking it purely in military police enforcement terms, which is, I think, where a lot of the drift in Europe has been of late, saying how do we stop it rather than how do we solve it at source.
No, Ian, I get the argument. I don't expect any great agreement to come out from this Grenada summit, do you?
Well, no, because the European political community is so far next to nothing. It has no secretariat, it has no powers. It's a grouping of up to 47 countries. But I think I checked carefully just before I came on. The only countries in Europe which are not part of it are Russia and Belarus.
Yeah.
Turkey,
it sort of replaces the old European Council, really. Ian Begg, thank you for your expert testimony. No easy answers, says Ian Begg. Well, he's almost certainly right. Joining me is Henry Bolton, former border security and management expert for the British government and intelligence advisor to the Home Office. Henry, the point I was making there to Professor Begg was, it seems to me that when the German president says we've reached breaking point, yes, there's that phrase which is very familiar to me from the referendum, and when we hear Poland saying they will take zero that have crossed the Mediterranean, I just don't see any agreement coming. I feel Rishi, with all respect to him, is wasting his time.
Yes, another yes or no, Nigel. One of the things to say first off is Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, was there front and centre of this meeting. So this isn't just a sort of a coordination meeting. This is a European Union orchestrated thing. We should make that clear. They're using this to extend their foreign policy and their political reach. But that aside, as Professor Begg said, we do have to cooperate and coordinate and collaborate with our European neighbours. That's one doesn't even need to sort of talk about that. That's obvious. But where Rishi is really on a hiding to nothing is methodology. First of all, he doesn't seem to be taking the lead at all. Secondly, I mean, he said he convened this meeting. He didn't convene this meeting. This meeting was effectively convened by the European Union, by the European Commission, and he wanted to be part of it. So, he's already sort of smoke and mirrors up there. But the main contribution, the main thing that he's done is agree with Serbia, with Bulgaria, particularly, that Bulgaria is important in this, to provide them with intelligence exchange and equipment for their borders to detect people in trucks. Basically, it's the same stuff that we've got at Dover and Southampton, so on. Now, that's fine with Bulgaria because on the roads, on the official crossing points with Turkey, because obviously there's a lot of flow through Turkey, but it's not going to work. I myself was in the Balkans. I was dealing with people smugglers, human traffickers, and the people themselves who were being moved for 3 years. These people were coming across from Turkey, not through the official border crossing point, but through the hills either side. They're not stupid. They know that that's a nexus point of law enforcement at the border crossing point. They don't move through there. They get off the trucks and the buses and they walk across. So, this is going nowhere. What's really needed, Nigel, Professor Begg is right about dealing with the push factors, why people leave. And here we've got to deal with the enforcement things, why people come here. That's a whole package. Those are both huge, complex packages. But in the middle, this disruption of the people smuggling routes themselves is crucial. And we did it until 2006. I was part of it until Tony Blair pulled the funding on it. In 2006, he cancelled the whole programme. We had 12 government agencies, the intelligence agencies, including defence intelligence. We had everything piled in, and there was a pointy tip of the spear that was actually on the ground, wearing body armour, going in through doors with local law enforcement and intelligence. This wasn't just intelligence exchange. This was on the ground tactical intelligence and operational disruption. We're not doing that. And until we do, this isn't going to work.
Henry Bolton, making your points with great force and great passion and great experience. Thank you for joining us again tonight on GB News. Looking forward to your thoughts as to whether Rishi is wasting his time at this summit. I fear that he is. Now, remember, Brexit was going to be the biggest single disaster to our biggest industry of financial services. The city, as they call it, but the city, of course, is in every single town and city in this country with jobs in insurance and banking, etc. Brexit was going to be a disaster, and yet the governor of the Bank of England, I'm not a big fan, suddenly says it could be good for the city. We examine all of that in just a moment.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, I asked you at home, do you think Rishi is wasting his time in Spain? Nick says, Spain won't stop the boats coming. I live there part-time. They need the younger generation that's coming from Venezuela to do the manual labour and fill the gaps that have been created by young Spanish leaving to work in other parts of the EU. Yeah, Nick, that's true, but that actually would be legal migration to Spain. What we're really talking about here are the huge numbers of vessels coming into places like Lampedusa. Shirley says, wasting our money. Another viewer says, I'm more concerned that any potential deal may see us taking a quota of the Mediterranean migrants. We didn't vote Brexit for the government to continue striking these backroom deals. No, I have to say, I absolutely agree with you. Now remember, in the run-up to the referendum, remember Project Fear? One of them was Brexit could kill 820,000 jobs. Yep, that's what our Chancellor George Osborne told us. It would also lead to an £800 pay cut for the average worker. He also said that each household would be worse off by up to £4,000 every year. And then, of course, we had another beauty. Yes, the Bank of England's Mark Carney, who warned of a city exodus. Yep, he said the city would lose jobs, businesses, company HQs, firms in the square mile would, without question, cut back on business activity in London. So all pretty dire. And when we voted Brexit, we were told we'd voted to be poorer, we'd voted to be weaker, we'd voted to devalue the City of London. Made me furious, having worked in the city for 20 years. All I saw was EU regulation holding us back from being the global capital that really is London's destiny. Well, you could knock me down with a feather this morning when I saw the current governor of the Bank of England, who I've not been a fan of on this programme, as you know. I always call him Andrew Out-to-Lunch Bailey because he always seems to miss the important things. But suddenly, the governor says Brexit has helped the city, not harmed it, despite the dire warnings of economists and experts. Now, I thought that was pretty significant. Even more surprising was Nikhil Rathi, the chief executive of my great mates at the Financial Conduct Authority, says leaving the EU has made it easier for the UK to tailor rules to its needs. Well, there we are. I'm absolutely thrilled that what with that and with our GDP figures showing since the day we left, we have grown more quickly than France and Germany. Sorry, still anemically, and much of that propped up by large-scale immigration, but we have grown more than France and Germany. Maybe we can end this ridiculous negative argument that you will see if you switch over right now to the BBC News channel, because that's what they'll tell you. They'll tell you the whole thing is dire. Well, joining me is a city man, Lord Jonathan Marland, chairman of the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council, and, of course, the former Prime Minister's trade envoy. Jonathan, you know, as a city man, the warnings were pretty bleak, weren't they?
They were. I'm quite suspicious, by the way, about this announcement. I'm still yet to be persuaded that the blob, as we would call these people, really think that we have left Europe. So I'm quite suspicious about these two announcements. There's no real sign that they have cut the umbilical cord. I mean, you know, you look at the way that the civil service is still bowing towards Europe, makes me suspicious, and so I will need some convincing. I'll also need convincing with our own government, and I'm a Conservative, as you know, and pleased to be a Conservative. But there's no Brexit dividend as yet, Nigel.
Yeah, I mean,
regulation is bad. I actually get on very well with the FCA, but the mountain of complaints you get about the slowness, the lack of pace with which they're dealing with this, and of course with the taxation levels that we have, corporation tax and all these other taxes upon us, is not paying the Brexit dividend. And then I want a further point, which I think shows in our foreign policy. Our great king, who is a great man, has only been to two countries. Where are they?
France and Germany.
Exactly, and yet he is king of Australia, New Zealand, Canada,
and in your Commonwealth role,
Commonwealth.
You must be furious.
I'm cross because we can't get the message through, and it's not his fault, by the way. He has done a fantastic job in establishing his position here as king. He's very well thought of, very popular. But, you know, if the Commonwealth is going to survive and if our realms are going to be his realms, the Foreign Office have got to start getting a plan out there for him.
So the argument here is clear. From, and however suspicious you may be, but actually from the numbers, we see that we haven't had the exodus from the City of London, etc. You know, there are big firms like Deutsche Bank taking out 20-year leases on office space. We know from the GDP figures, again, disappointing, but in relative terms to France and Germany. So Brexit hasn't hurt us, but we haven't reaped.
Well, it could yet hurt us if we carry on with this high taxation thing, because, you know, a lot of American bankers won't want to be here, they'll want to be somewhere else. And a lot of insurance people, which, you know, you and I know pretty well, will not want to be here. People like Aon came and based themselves here when I was in government with George Osborne. We set a reduction in corporation tax, which encouraged them to bring their headquarters here from Chicago. Now, what are they thinking now? What is the future?
Yeah, I mean, a 30% rise in corporation tax earlier this year. It does beg a belief. And yet, from the leader of your party yesterday, in his speech.
Our party, isn't it now? I saw you up there.
Oh, no, they're sort of saying they might, they're sort of hinting they might want me back. But,
I'm sure they would.
I'll be like Groucho Marx. I wouldn't join a club that would have me. But almost nothing in the speech on business from Rishi Sunak, other than this platitude with a party of small business, with no IR35 reform, with the corporation tax rise that you've mentioned. There was almost nothing for entrepreneurship and business. How is it, Jonathan Marland, how is it that a Conservative government with an 80-seat majority, elected on a Brexit ticket, hasn't done these things, hasn't done the right things?
I think you're being a bit harsh, and I think that obviously this speech was going to get sidetracked by HS2, which was a big...
Sure.
And you don't tend to get in the leader's speech much on business and taxation. And
but with respect, I didn't hear it much from the Chancellor either.
No, well, that's more of a thing. You're more justified in pointing your finger there, because that's where you should hear it. And we may well hear it in the autumn statement. So I'm giving them a little bit of time to get that out. I mean, they know what's got to happen. And I don't think they'll get re-elected, or we will get re-elected, unless we do show a clear path to business that we are a lower regulation, lower tax economy than the rest of our competitors, not by huge amounts, but marginal amounts, better than Europe, and the United States in particular.
The FCA boss, Mr. Rathi, says we can now tailor rules to suit our own needs. When are they
totally right.
When are they going to start doing it?
Well, I think the FCA have got a bit of a problem, because they've got, apparently, this working system where you can work the hours that you want to in your own time. Well, imagine having a meeting if you want to work from 4 till 12 and someone else wants to...
But hang on.
These sort of things have got to stop.
These people are on the public payroll.
Well,
the taxpayers paying for these people. Can't the government insist they actually go to blooming work?
My interface with the FCA has actually been excellent over the last 12 months, so I can't speak for myself, and we're interfacing with them a lot in our insurance business. But I am hearing a huge amount of complaints about the complacency and the lack of delivery there. I mean, they are obviously a target, but I do think he's doing a good job. I think he is trying very hard to improve the situation, and we need to give him a bit more time, because he's fairly new on the job. And he is actually, funny enough, who did he take over from?
Andrew Bailey.
Correct, your old friend.
Yeah, and before that, Howard Davis, who, of course, is still the chairman of the NatWest Banking Group.
An old friend of yours. They're both old friends.
And I've got a bit to say about NatWest later on in the programme. Well, I just hope he actually gets on with this banking review, because he was very slow. Jonathan Marland, it's sort of... It's good news in one way. It just could be so much better, couldn't it?
Inevitably. And it is all about this Brexit dividend that you fought very hard for, and we are now in, whether we like it or not. We have got to get our mind round that we are out of Europe, that we have got the opportunity, and we have huge markets. And I spend my time in the Commonwealth, as you know. It's a massive market, and we're missing out on all these things. Can we get a senior government minister Bangladesh, the second fastest growing economy in the world? You know, amazing. Growth, huge powerhouse that's becoming. No, because they're obsessed by going to places which...
And if we don't go, the Chinese will.
Exactly.
Jonathan Marland, as ever, thank you for joining me on the programme. In a moment, an update. Yes, RAF Scampton, the base that we visited more than once. I've got an update for you on what is going on. There is a local protest because the council have given an order to say stop developing this site, stop ruining its history, and yet it appears the contractors are continuing. The Battle of Scampton, that famous Dam Busters base, is continuing.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, this show will not drop its support for RAF Scampton being kept as it is and being a living museum for the extraordinary exploits of those brave men during World War II. GB News' local reporter Will Hollis sent us this report on the latest from Scampton today.
Home away from home.
So this is a cooking area. And then this is where we keep everything, so spares of everything, batteries, torches, tea, coffee, sugar, water.
Sarah only lives a mile away on the other side of Scampton. She's been living in a tent for a week, but her battle to stop asylum seekers moving into the old RAF base has lasted 6 months. The Home Office is preparing Scampton to house 2,000 asylum seekers. But now West Lindsey District Council has told the Home Office to stop work, saying it's breaching planning restrictions. It served an enforcement notice and a stop notice, the same powers used to control a dodgy builder. But the Lincolnshire Council and community says contractors are ploughing on.
I clocked in 1 hour between 6:30 and 7:30 in the morning, 47 vehicles going on. The people that are making the laws are breaking the laws, and so we're taking it upon ourselves to make sure that we document that they are breaking the law.
The Home Office is struggling to manage the number of migrants reaching Britain's shores. Old military bases are badged as a small solution for the growing problem. West Lindsey District Council disagrees. A £300 million deal to transform the old base into a heritage centre was soaring. Now it's in free fall, according to the council's Director of Planning and Regeneration, Sally Grindrod-Smith.
We are very concerned about the conditions on site, the state of the site. There's a huge amount of buildings that are on that site that could come back into commercial use. We've spoken previously about the runway and the airfield, which is a very valuable asset.
In a statement, the Home Office said, "We are aware that West Lindsey District Council has issued a notice in relation to the works at Scampton. We are carefully considering the implications of this notice." Back at Scampton, support for the campaign isn't hard to come by.
It's very noisy, but I normally sleep with a fan on anyway, even during the winter, so it doesn't bother me, the noise.
Sarah and other locals are staying here until the end of October, when a judicial review will decide if the Home Office plans for Scampton Base can go ahead. Outside, locals are calling their makeshift camp Dunkirk Spirit, people coming together. The worry is that, inside the base, history is being torn apart. Will Hollis, GB News in Scampton.
And as Will Hollis says, literally, physically, history is being torn apart. Sarah, you are very determined. Keep up the good work. Now, my What the Farage moment is, do you remember 2.5 weeks ago that the Prime Minister, said to us he was going to remove the cost of net zero from us. Indeed, when it came to energy performance certificates on our houses, and this could mean for particularly older houses, having to spend thousands of pounds to bring them up to standard. Don't worry, all of that will be dropped. And yet, mortgage lenders, several of them, are demanding that houses are brought up to those standards. Our old friends NatWest, oh yes, on the website say, our approach to climate change sets out net zero policies, including making 50% of our UK mortgage customers' homes at an EPC rating of C or more by 2030. So if you're off to NatWest to get a new mortgage, or you want to buy a property, get a mortgage on it, you may find you have to spend thousands of pounds making it greener before they'll give you that mortgage. It's all well and good getting nice words that come from the Prime Minister, but if the banks don't play ball, what can you do? Talking of banks, Metro Bank was set up by a great entrepreneur called Vernon Hill. He set it up and established branches across high streets around the country, the first new bank with multiple high street branches in this country since 1840. Unfortunately, a few years on, Hill got shifted out by the board. Metro Bank now in dire trouble. Their share price has collapsed 50% this week. They need to raise £600 million very urgently, or they may well go bust. Well, I'm sorry, but if you will, overnight on a whim, just debank the Brexit Party, which a few months before had won a national European election, then maybe you'll find Metro Bank that what goes around comes around. In a moment, on a slightly lighter note, it is the Rugby World Cup taking place in France. England, thus far, doing quite well. Our next game on Saturday. So let's talk about our prospects. Let's talk about the game of rugby, and I'm joined by legendary tight head prop Jeff Probyn, who's going to join me in a moment for Talking Pints.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Talking Pints. It's going to be about life, about rugby with Jeff Probyn, former tight head prop and England legend. Cheers, Jeff.
Thank you.
Welcome to the programme. Now, East End boy, growing up.
East End, how dare you? It was North One.
Well, OK. That end of town. Growing up where football was utterly dominant, and you overcame childhood disease as well.
Yeah, when I came out of caesarean when I was born. A couple of years later, I developed osteomyelitis, which meant I had my legs in plaster when I was about 2 years old. Was in hospital for a number of weeks and months. But fortunately, I got over it. And
you clearly got over it.
Yeah, yeah.
But when you come from a part of town where football is so dominant, and what team you support, why was it rugby for you?
Well, it wasn't. Literally, I'd say that you were born in the middle of Shoreditch. There's no rugby anywhere.
No,
simply because there's no grass. And so football would have been something I might have got into. But when I went to my secondary school, London Nautical School, they were south of the river.
Yep.
They played rugby.
Yep.
We used to have to travel from London all the way down to Malden at the end of the Northern Line, which is where the playing fields were. So by the time we finished playing the school rugby, the morning, if we got back, you'd be too late to go to football, even if it was local football to me.
And you were obviously good at it too.
I wasn't bad. The teacher didn't think I was any good at it because I'm younger of two brothers. My brother had played before me, and he said, "You'll never be as good as your brother."
Well, there you go.
There you go.
So you kept on playing rugby, and because you had a job, and it was a completely, as you're going through club rugby and you're working your way up into the bigger name clubs as well, Wasps and all the things you did. It was don't forget, it was a fully amateur game, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, there was. Even when you play for England, I mean, think about it, we're in a World Cup now. Players are going to get £100,000, I think, plus potential win bonuses and things like that. When I played in 1991, we got through to the final.
You played in the final, yep.
Yeah, we got 20p a mile to drive to Twickenham.
To play in a World Cup rugby final.
To play a World Cup rugby.
And it's only 30 years ago.
And it's only 30 years. And we after the World Cup, where we got to the final, I think World Rugby made about £70 million, and I think the RFU got about 30 million. We got a pair of cufflinks.
I'm sorry to laugh.
But actually, the interesting thing is that you only got the cufflinks if you also played in the back-to-back Grand Slams, which was the 91 and 92.
Yeah.
If you didn't play in both those Grand Slams and the World Cup, you didn't get the cufflinks.
But you got the cufflinks, obviously. You got the cufflinks. Because you played.
I still have them. I haven't taken them out the box.
But amateur or professional, you got through to that World Cup final. Was it really gutty to lose?
Well, yes and no. I say yes and no because getting to it was a fantastic feeling.
Yeah.
Playing the game and, all right, when you've lost it, you get that dejection a little bit. But the saddest moment for me was that we all left the field, we're in the change room, and my wife tells me that as soon as that happened, the whole of Twickenham burst into the song, "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life."
That's terrific, isn't it?
And I missed it. That's the only sad bit about it. Really.
Our rugby crowd's fantastic. You know,
They are.
I went to Twickenham a couple of years back, England playing France, and all the supporters mixed in together, and huge amounts of Mickey taking, and one or two of these going down before, during, and after the game. It seemed to be no aggro.
Oh no,
no difficult. Rugby still has a fantastic atmosphere, doesn't it?
It does. It does. You know, sadly the game's altered. I think that professionalism in any sport alters it. People trying to protect their jobs, whether it's the coaches or the players.
Yeah.
You know, so there's elements in it that are different. People play the game for a different reason. I mean, when there's no money involved in something, you're playing it because you love it.
Well, you love it, and you've got to work as well.
Exactly.
And you're representing England, and your kind of day is pretty full with, you know, you've got to, as you were, you know, married with family, and quite difficult to sort of fit everything together. And we had lots of England rugby players that, you know, they were surgeons, they were this, they were that.
Oh, they were, yeah.
You know, the problem rugby's got, I mean, one, it's got some financial problems with its clubs. The other problem, it seems to me, Jeff Probyn, is that rugby players seem to be fitter, faster, stronger, more muscle, more heavily trained. The impact speeds are greater. The debate and conversation around...
Not true.
Not true. Go on, tell me.
Not true. Where rugby... a lot of people think that rugby changed when the game went professional in 1995. No, it didn't. It changed after the first World Cup in 1987. Up until that moment, training for England would consist of, say, 50 scrums, 50 line-outs, a bit of unopposed, so the backs could get a bit of running around, and then off to the pub for a few beers. After the first World Cup, England introduced Olympic trainers. We had Tom McNabb, we had guys from Loughborough, Rex Hazelwoodine, who's one of the professors who's taught most of the fitness coaches that are involved in Premiership rugby and current rugby with England, took over our training. And we changed from doing what I said to doing plyometric training, to doing anaerobic training, to doing aerobic training. We got into this system of fitness, which is probably why we won 91, 92 Grand Slams.
Which you did, which is a fantastic achievement. So, OK, the fitness changed all those years ago. But the worries now around concussion, around injury, I mean, it is a dangerous game, isn't it?
Well, the issues around concussion and all that have come about since the World Rugby allowed the influence of rugby league without actually taking in some of the safety measures that they have in rugby league. They've allowed rugby league defence to come into rugby union, which is what's called a rush defence. In union, used to use a thing called drift defence, which would mean you take the player outside you. Right, so you drifted across the field. Rush defence, you run straight.
So back.
Yes. In rugby league, when you have a breakdown, both teams have to retreat. So you end up with a space of between 15 and 20 metres. And so you have a rush defence to close that space quickly. In rugby union, they didn't bring that retreat into it. So when you have a breakdown, both sets of players are something like 8 metres apart. And you get a rush defence in that sort of situation, players don't have the time to adjust their body position. So you end up with more head collisions. And that's why you've got more of this problem involved in the professional game than you had in the amateur game.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with power, nothing to do with...
That's very interesting. It's a change of the way the game is being played. Yeah. That is very... I wasn't aware of that at all. So here we are. It's the Rugby World Cup in France, much vaunted, much trailed. We're weeks and weeks into it. It seems that the games are so far spread apart, I can't quite get my head round it.
Well, I think, you know, it's part of this aspect of player welfare.
Yeah, okay.
You've got to create space in the game so that players have time to rest, which for me seems quite funny because when I was playing, as I say, I didn't train that much, but what I used to do is play rugby. So I, for instance, as a schoolboy, I played in Malden. We had a guy who was a barrister who refereed and coached us. And he wasn't doing it altruistically. We'd play the game first thing in the morning in Malden, in Surrey. I'm 17. He'd drive us from Malden to St Albans, where I'd play for Old Albanians in the afternoon. So I'd be having 2 games in the space of a few hours.
Well, you obviously loved it.
I did.
You obviously loved it. So can this England team, because Because they're off to a good start. At least I think they're off to a good start. Do you think they're off to a good start?
It's funny because I've just been having a discussion with an ex-Wasp player outside. And we were saying that, before this World Cup started...
everybody was so down on English rugby.
Well, they're all down on it because England's performance in the Six Nations, right? But the reality was that if you actually looked at our World Cup draw, without considering the Six Nations, we had the easiest draw of any nation, any of the superior nations. So in that sense, we should be winning. We should be the leaders of our pool. We should win our pool. We'll probably go into a quarter-final against Fiji.
Yeah, we've got Samoa on Saturday.
Yeah. But, in normal circumstances, if you were saying England versus Samoa, you'd say 30, 40 points.
Yeah.
And it's only because of the bad Six Nations that people are thinking...
OK, so we're going to get through the quarterfinals.
We'll get through the quarterfinals. We get Fiji for the quarterfinals. When we get into the semis, then we get into the serious stuff.
Yeah.
But if we can win that one, what happens in a final is...
Well, and of course, it's 20 years ago. It's 20 years ago, but the last second Johnny Wilkinson drop... It's still one of the great sporting moments of any sport, isn't it?
It is, of course it is, And yet, there is a bit of me that says, well, Johnny Wilkinson, you go Johnny Wilkinson, but remember that rugby's a team game. So... the fact that Johnny Wilkinson dropped that goal...
I know.
Do we all remember that Steve Thompson threw the ball into the line-out? And Lawrence Delalio and Neil Back lifted Lewis Moody in the air. He caught the ball. Yeah. And he fed Matt Dawson, who threw the ball out.
You're absolutely right. It is a team game. Just like a TV station, it's a team game as well.
Of course.
Otherwise, it doesn't work. And yet, in common folk history... we'll remember Johnny Wilkinson.
Of course we will.
We'll remember the Jeff Hurst hat-trick in 1966, and this is what sticks in our minds. Jeff Probyn, I want to say a huge thank to you for coming in, sharing your story about your life and career in rugby. And let's keep our fingers crossed that England can go on.
Yep.
And win this World
if
Cup.
England don't win, I hope that any one of the Northern Hemisphere teams win, whether it's France, whether it's Ireland, whether it's Wales, because... if you think about it, we've had 10 World Cups, 9 have been won by the Southern Hemisphere.
Down under. Right.
It's our turn.
Time for the Northern Hemisphere to take the trophy. There we are. That's what Jeff Probyn wants. I just want England to win. That's all I can say. And our Cricket World Cup not off to a great start. Never mind. Let's have a look. What has the weather got in store for us?
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office for the GB News forecast. Fine in the far south over the next 24 hours. A different story elsewhere. There will be cloud. There'll be outbreaks of rain as well. Not everywhere all the time, but some significant rain could build up in places by the weekend. Low pressure at the moment to the northwest of Scotland. A number of trailing weather fronts bringing a lot of cloud to the UK for the rest of Thursday and into Friday. Those outbreaks of rain continuing over parts of Wales into the Midlands, Northern England, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland. Initial band of rain clearing from the far north of Scotland, pushed away by a strong wind. And it's going to be a warm night everywhere with that wind and the cloud. Temperatures in many places not falling much below 15 degrees. Then we start off Friday with those cloudy conditions, the breezy conditions as well. Plenty of brightness actually for central and northern Scotland. A much better day compared with Thursday and certainly Saturday. But for much of Northern Ireland into southern Scotland later, as well as northern England, rain will persist through the day. It's to the south where we're going to see the warmth building and increasingly high temperatures through the weekend are expected. But for Scotland, certainly it's going to be a wet start to the weekend. That rain really building up through Saturday and the first part of Sunday. Western parts of Scotland at risk of seeing 150 millimetres of rainfall. A very different story for the rest of the UK, and certainly across the southern half of England and Wales, we'll see temperatures into the low to mid-20s.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, All you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News.